Hi, Lara. Thank you so much for joining us for the Tech Girl Masterclass. Now, as Chief Digital Officer at the Scouts, you're leading digital transformation for an organization that is rooted in values and community and youth development. And your own career spans both purpose-led work and innovation, which makes you the perfect person to talk to about building a meaningful career in tech. So let's dive in. So when talking about the first year of your career, when someone's just starting out in tech, especially if they're mission driven, what should they be focusing on in that first year to set themselves up for long-term growth?
I think it's really hard when you're at the beginning of your career to really think about long-term. I mean, I'll be really honest up front. I didn't have a plan. I've never really had a career plan. So, maybe don't learn from me in that aspect. But I think one of the most important things is to be really mindful and thoughtful about what your strengths are and also your development areas, because I think it's easy to just, quite often, I know I certainly did, I kind of grabbed a job and I didn't particularly think about why I was doing it. It sounded quite interesting. And it was only sort of during the first couple of years in that job that I really started working out what I was good at, which was basically project management, which is where I sort of ended up. But I didn't know that there was even really a job called project manager when I started. But it kind of became clear to me that I was quite organized. I was quite good at managing other people to get tasks done, even though I was doing fairly simple tasks. And so I think for me, looking back, if you're really mindful about what you're enjoying, what you think, actually, I did that really well, and kind of reflecting on that and then thinking about how you can do more of the things that you are good at, because, naturally, we will do better at things that, we're successful at, that we enjoy. I think that's the thing I would focus on, but also obviously thinking again about where things are hard for you or where things are, you just think, oh, that didn't go too well. And then again, thinking about, well, how could I be a bit better next time? How can I develop myself? Is there, I didn't even have, we didn't even have really the web when I was in my first career because I'm that old. So, I think it's very different now where you can just go on LinkedIn or do sort of Google short courses for free. So, it's really easy to pick up and do self-development. Again, I didn't really do any of that stuff. So that's the sort of places that I would look to if I was starting my career again now.
Lovely. Well, just following up from that self-development aspect, from what you've seen, what kind of common traps do people fall into early on? How do you stay grounded and intentional?
Yeah. I think intentional is actually a really good word, because I think, and it depends on personalities, but I think particularly in a new job where you're kind of probably getting used to just how an organization works. So maybe people might tend to be, sort of sit back and listen and observe. And I think that's actually really good. Don't rush in. Observe the culture, observe how other people do things, take notes about what works. So if you go to a meeting and you think, oh, that person was really speaking out of turn, or that person didn't run the meeting very well, again, it's being intentional and thinking, okay, if I was running that meeting, and okay, in your first year of your career, you probably wouldn't be running a meeting, but, if I was doing it, how might I do that better and differently? I think not rushing generally. I think when you start something, you're probably quite keen, you may be keen to impress and keen to build something, but again, not rushing, taking your time. Again, I would be really intentional with every conversation you have, whether that's a 5-minute conversation with a colleague about a specific project, or whether it's your one-to-one with your manager. I would really take the time to think about conversations in advance. And when I say that, it's try and think about what you want to achieve out of the conversation and how you're going to get to that. For bigger meetings, or particularly with your line manager or maybe more senior people, even if you only take 5 minutes before the meeting and jot down some of the things you want to achieve, but also thinking again about the people that you're meeting with. So what do you know about those people? Again, you might not know that much at the beginning, but what do you know about them? How do they like to receive information? How do they consider things? And how then also, I guess, what are their personal drivers? So if you know that someone, I don't know, is really passionate about data, how can you introduce data into the conversation and show that you're leading with a data-based approach? I think all of those things are things that you can think about in advance. And it doesn't mean spending hours and hours preparing every conversation, because that's not going to be possible. Yeah. I don't always do this, but if I'm trying to be really intentional in my role, I still would take 5 minutes and just think about, 3 quick things that I think are really important to get out of a conversation. And I think, as you said at the beginning, that word intentional is really important, because you will get better results out of every conversation if you try and do that.
So let's say this person's, on their path to becoming more intentional, and they're not rushing through things, and they're making note of those 3 things, as you said. Going back to the career roadmap aspect of this, we often hear that phrase, but in purpose-led roles like yours, that journey can often take, unexpected turns. How do you balance that long-term ambition with the flexibility to evolve and adapt, especially when your values or the needs of an organization shift?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I personally didn't have a roadmap, so I didn't start my career thinking that I wanted to end my career working in charity, sort of mission-based organisations. So I certainly didn't do that. I think as maybe rather than having a career roadmap, I think it is really important to think about what is important to you and what you do value, and keeping that close to you, because, I think especially when you're in the start of your career, you might end up in an organisation where some of those values, it might not be that easy to adhere to. I mean, especially in the tech world, we all know that there are big tech companies which might be amazing at developing your career, and you might get amazing expertise from that, but maybe they won't always be very values based. So I think being really clear for yourself about what's important to you, and you might say, actually, I don't mind working for somewhere which doesn't particularly align with my values for the first 5 years, 10 years, whatever of my career, because actually I want to gain as much knowledge and as much experience as I can. And then potentially I can think about going somewhere where maybe it is more values based. So I think that's a really important thing, again, to think about in advance, and think about, I guess, kind of what your red lines are, particularly around values. I think in terms of adapting to what happens, again, I think it's keeping clear on your own strengths and the experience that you're getting out of things. So, you might end up in a role that wasn't what you were planning, wasn't what you expected, or you get to an organisation and, this has happened quite often to me, the role isn't really quite what it was described to you. But I think just as long as you are clear about what you are getting from it, what experience you are gaining along the way, and how you can build that towards your next step, personally, I don't think it really matters. You're always going to learn something. You're always going to develop, particularly in soft skills like how you deal with people, how you manage stakeholders, how you move towards a leadership role. You are going to learn those wherever, if you've got the right mindset towards that. So personally, I don't think it really matters if you kind of go off course a bit and you end up somewhere that wasn't quite what you planned. But again, that's based on my experience of not having a particular plan and just kind of going with the flow. But I know that not everyone wants to do that.
Yeah, I mean, some people do tend to go with the flow, or they're guided by a mentor, for example. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I wanted to ask you then, Lara. What role has mentorship or sponsorship possibly played in your career journey?
Yeah, I mean, again, I I I didn't really access that sort of stuff when I was younger. Although in my first job, one of the older directors in the business, and he retired while I was there. Sort of, I don't know, he kind of took a shine to me, and he was very supportive, and he used to really have chats with me about what I was good at. Which I think, kind of effectively was a sort of mentoring role, but without telling me that's what he was doing. And that made a massive difference to me, again, to work out what I was good at. And he kind of threw me more challenges and helped to stretch me. And he also gave me confidence in sort of believing in myself. So I think, particularly at the beginning of your career, that can be really, really valuable because you don't have that confidence naturally. So I would absolutely say, see if you can get a mentor as much as possible. I've done quite a lot of mentoring to other people in the last 15, 20 years. But also I had a mentor, particularly at a key point in my career where I was working as a kind of head of position, but I really wanted to get to the next level and sort of get to that chief, more senior level. And I was sort of struggling to see, what the difference in leadership levels was and how I would get there. And I did work with someone who was actually a CEO of a charity at the time, which was incredibly generous of him. And I learned so much from him. That was really, really valuable to me. He really made me think, again, quite differently about how to be much more intentional with stuff that I was doing, how to be very deliberate, again, things like planning a meeting, particularly difficult things. So I was going through a stage where I had some fairly challenging relationships with some of my colleagues, and I found those, really difficult to think about. And he really helped me with some tools to think about how I dealt with, difficult and challenging situations. And he had a very strong marketing background. And he was brilliant at really helping me think about how I developed my own kind of personal profile and persona, which I hadn't really actively done before. And as a result, I did a lot more stuff like really thinking about my LinkedIn profile, taking on speaking opportunities, going to conferences, really thinking about what I was putting out there. And that made a massive, massive difference. So I did get the step up role within the organisation. And then after a couple of years, that was at Age UK, I then moved on to the current role that I'm at Scout. So that wasn't that long ago. It was about 8-9 years ago. I have to say that mentoring at that point for me was a real step change in my career. So I absolutely see the value of it. And as I said, I have mentored various people through the years, usually people who are sort of digital in their career within charities, but digital roles. And most of the time, I found that the mentoring relationship usually lasts 6 to 9 months, and nearly all the people that I have mentored have ended up taking a career, step up as a result of building confidence, seeing what they're good at, and kind of moving on, which is always really great to see.
That's amazing. Yeah. So, Lara, I'm going to ask you to put your mentoring hat on once again when it comes to building out your persona, as you mentioned just now. For someone just getting started, what's your advice on building those genuine connections, maybe on LinkedIn or at networking events, and finding the right mentor?
Okay, so I'll start with finding the right mentor. You do have to be a bit brave. And I know that can be scary, particularly if you're kind of just starting out in your career. What I would be thinking about is, again, what are your stretch areas that you think, I really want to develop a bit more of this? It's no good going and finding a mentor and just saying, I just want to develop. It's much better to be able to go to a mentor and say, I particularly want to work on these things. Could you help me? If it was me, I would either go to my boss, my line manager, and say, is there someone that could help that could help me? So one of the people that I'm mentoring at the moment is as a result of his manager seeing me talk at a conference and then approaching me and saying, oh, I've got a young man in my team that I would really love if you could mentor him. And I just said, sure. So I've been mentoring him actually for, quite a few months now. So that's one way, because your line manager might have connections that you wouldn't have. The other way is, again, if you see people speaking at a conference that you think, oh, I really admire them, or I really think I could learn from them, then you might just connect with them on LinkedIn and then ask them. You might have, if you work for a big organization, there might be people who are more senior to you, but say in another area of the organization that you think, again, oh, I really admire the way that they work, the way that they do things, whatever. And you might reach out to them again directly to say, I'd be really interested in mentoring. That's happened to me in the last year, where a young woman from a completely another team just came up to me and said, oh, I really admire the way you talk to people in front of staff meetings and your leadership style, and I'm really interested, particularly as a female leader. Would you be prepared to mentor me? So again, I've said yes. So for me, again, it's a matter of time. So if someone is already mentoring loads of people, they might say no. But I've hardly ever said no to people. I think most people are pretty generous with their time. And I think it does require a bit of bravery to be able to go to someone and sort of say, I really admire you. Would you be prepared to mentor me? Again, if you've got a specific ask with, I really want to develop myself in this area. So that's the way I would go about mentoring, whether it's with people that you've met, people that you've seen in a conference, or connecting with them through LinkedIn. I think in terms of your second question, which you'll have to remind me of.
Yeah, so it's more about, how
building a persona.
Building genuine connections and the persona, yes.
Yeah, okay. So building connections is hard, I think, when you've just started your career. But again, LinkedIn is a fantastic tool for you to find other people who are maybe in similar type of roles in other organizations. So for instance, in the charity space, that is pretty easy. You could literally just look up someone who has got a job title that is similar to yours in maybe a couple of other organizations that do similar things. And then again, I would just literally connect with someone on LinkedIn and say, oh, I'd love to be able to meet you for a coffee and hear about how you do things. So I think, LinkedIn is a great tool, because most people who are trying to develop their career will be on LinkedIn. And again, I think most people will be pretty up for it, especially if they're in similar kind of roles, also trying to develop their career. You're both going to get something out of it. And I think often just building up a network, even if it's just a couple of other people that you get on with, who work in similar kinds of organizations, and maybe you could get together once a month, whatever, for a virtual coffee and just compare notes. What things have gone well for you in the last month? What things haven't? Oh, I've had a bit of a challenge. I don't know how to deal with, a difficult line manager. What do you think? I think that is extremely valuable. And, you never know, you might end up with connections that, you have throughout your career. Again, I don't think reaching out to people you don't know on LinkedIn is a problem. I think most people will respond. And again, it's online. It's not like you've got to completely put yourself out there personally. Again, if you can go to conferences, there's a lot of conferences that are free to attend. I would try and go to those, and potentially you might just get sitting next to someone that you might chat to. Personally, I find conference networking quite hard because I'm not a natural extrovert, and walking into a room of strangers, I've always found hard, and I still find hard. I'm pretty good at acting and doing what I need to do, but I get that that's actually really hard for some people. So I would say don't beat yourself up if that sort of makes you feel sick to the stomach. It still makes me feel quite sick to the stomach to walk into a room of people I don't know. So don't beat yourself up if you don't feel comfortable that, do it online, do it through LinkedIn. There's no problem with that. But I do think that the more connections you make, and again, build up your persona potentially through LinkedIn by linking to stuff that you like. No, don't just repost, put a little comment, comment on things that you think are interesting. You don't have to, come out with rocket science on that, but just building that profile to show that you're looking more widely, that you're not just doing your job, that you're aware of what else is going on in your sector. All of those things are really, really valuable.
So going back then to just what you said there about putting yourself out there, I want to go back to the more growth and visibility aspects of building out your career and your role. We talk a lot about being seen in your early career, and in your experience, how can someone contribute meaningfully and still make sure that their work gets noticed, especially in like large or more traditional organizations?
I think it's really easy, actually. I think if you can think about within your team and always be looking out for ideas that might improve things. So it might be really simple, like I go to a meeting and it's really badly managed, for instance. So how could I potentially put forward an agenda that we could work to that would make the meeting more efficient? It doesn't have to be big rocket science ideas. It can be really simple improvements. We have this really stupid process for, new work requests. We've worked on this in my team in the last few years. It's really analog. People just send emails. It's really stupid. So again, someone in my team went, why don't we build a form? I mean, again, it's not, cutting edge technology, but everyone, once you've done it, everyone's like, why didn't we do that before? Often it's just because other people don't have time to do it. So for me, I think no one who is in a manager role is ever going to go, oh, why did you do that? If it's solving a problem that you've seen, everyone's going to just go, wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much for doing it. So I think coming up with ideas or solutions, and again, don't just come up with an idea, but think through how it's actually going to work. So no one, again, a manager who's busy won't necessarily want to go, oh, great, you've got a great idea, but now I've got to think through how we're going to implement it, what we're going to do next. Go to someone, go, I've had this great idea, or I've seen this problem. This is my suggested solution. This is what I think we could do about it. I already think I can work on this with so-and-so and so-and-so, and we can get it to you to see what you think in the next, 2 weeks, month, whatever it is. Go to someone with a practical solution. For me, that is absolutely the number one thing I would, as a manager, stand back and go, wow, that person is fantastic. They're solving problems for me. I think that is a much better approach. Personally, I would really appreciate that much more than, someone kind of sending me emails with documents and, oh, I've done this, I've done that. I think the other thing is about how you work in a team. So for me, it is absolutely not about an individual pushing themselves forward above other people. But what I would notice in my team is people who look out for other people who take time to explain things for other people who offer to help when someone else is massively under pressure, people who support other people's ideas and help them progress, people who pull people together when they're stressed, and make things, even if it's just having a chat with people. I notice that stuff, and that's the stuff that makes me think that person really cares about how the team works. They really care about other people. that's the kind of person that I would look out to see how I can develop and promote them. So those are the things that, and that's not to say that everyone would do that, but for me, how people operate in a team is absolutely the key to career success. And that's how you develop people who are, go towards leadership positions.
Oh, that's very interesting. So Lara, you've offered a lot of useful advice today and lots of insights. Putting that all together then, if you were to offer a piece of advice to your younger self, just starting out in tech, in your first role, what would you say to her?
That's really hard. Be brave, I think. Try not to let your sort of self-doubt stop you from trying things. I think that's what I would say. I think I would have been further forward faster if I had been a bit more brave when I was younger.
Okay. Be brave. I think that's a really good key takeaway, I think, for a lot of people. It's just that's the first step to getting there, isn't it?
Yeah. And I don't think, just as long as you're not, as I said, you're not brash, you're not pushy, you're not putting other people down on your way to things. I think most people would just recognize that and reward it and say, okay, you had a go at doing something. Maybe you didn't get everything right. Maybe you had a go at something and then go up to someone afterwards, a line manager or someone more senior, and say, oh, I did this. Could you give me some feedback? I think most people would absolutely recognize that and reward it. I think that's definitely what I would suggest.
Absolutely. And last question then, Lara, what is, one book, podcast, or maybe a resource that you return to again and again for inspiration or personal career development?
I don't really read anything kind of like that regularly. I am not a great reader of self-help books and leadership development books, I have to say. I think the area that I found most helpful in developing my teams in the last sort of decade or so is work by Patrick Lencioni on building successful teams. So I think that is really helpful. There's kind of 5 areas of success between and comparing a team that works really well compared to a team that's sort of dysfunctional. And for me, thinking about those and always thinking about how am I contributing to those 5 key areas is something that I suppose I do return to kind of keep checking in on things. But I would say keep reading widely, keep looking at lots of different things. Again, there's so many different TED Talks out there. Some people you'll just like because you like their style. Some people you might just find annoying, so it doesn't matter. There's too much almost out there. So, I would go, if you like someone, you read something that you think makes sense, look at them and keep looking at them, but don't feel like, oh, well, that person's supposed to be a real guru. I must read them or I must look at them. Everyone's got something to say on this stuff. So just, be open-minded is what I would say.
Absolutely. And it's about finding the right fit for you.
Yes.
It's what applies for everyone.
Yes, exactly. Because, we're all different. We've all got different styles on us. There is not one way to develop. There is not one way to be a great leader. Some of it is always going to be about your own purpose, your own mission, your own style, your own behaviors. Yes, you can absolutely develop and tweak things. So I think that's also really important to keep in mind, that you are a person with your own strengths and areas of development. You don't have to just become a carbon copy of someone else.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time, Lara Burns. And that concludes the interview.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.